A heartfelt welcome to today's episode of Humanities Dialogue, presented by DEIpeople.com. We're so excited to have you join us for this dialogue. Hosted by Quincy and Daniella, DEI leader, activist and disruptor, and Daniella Fairbairn, author of Insanely Great Customer Service, and the podcast host of Be Insanely Great. Let's have a real humanities dialogue together. Now, beloveds, let's dive into today's episode.
Welcome to another episode of Humanities Dialogue, sponsored by DEIpeople.com, hashtag DEIPeopleOfficial on Instagram, and DEIpeople.com. I'm your host, Quincy Daniella, parent, husband, entrepreneur, DEI disturber, with my wonderful co-host,
Daniella Fairbairn. Thank you, Quincy. So I am a wife, I'm a leader, I'm an advocate, and I'm creating a world of culturally competent leaders who are able to be compassionate and fully aware and present in the moment in making decisions.
All right, Daniella. So today's episode is all about manhood in America.
Interesting, Quincy. I love it already.
Who came up with that idea to do an episode on manhood?
Yes.
And it's about the identification with masculinity as a provider and as leaders within our world. Again, this is about the American experience. Mm-hmm. It is not to be taken out of context with other countries, but really the United States of America.
Yes.
And I just want to set the stage for this conversation. And it's really about the identification with the masculine energy or the masculine side of a human being, in which a lot of American men presently are trending to align and assimilate with. And so I think our first question we'll dive into is, what does a man look like in America today to you?
I think it's a loaded question, Quincy.
Loaded questions
Yeah,
on
I
this
think so.
podcast? Never.
I think it's such a loaded question because it depends on the individual.
Yes.
No two men are the same. No two persons are the same. And so depending on the individual is a type of energy they will give.
Yeah.
And so you have traditional masculinity and you have modern masculinity. And I think that traditional masculinity is not, it's something that I am used to here in America.
Yeah.
But I do think it's important for us to progress, and there is a modern version to it, right? More inclusive, more vulnerable, more understanding. And so that is what I say being a man in America can be. But it's so much, it's just so much. You know, it's not one thing.
I think also it is a loaded question, as you said, because when you have this concept of what a traditional, right, which signifies the foundation, like the base point of what a masculine or what a man looks like traditionally, is already loaded in itself.
Yes.
Because from time to time as we evolve as humans, that traditional will be more than likely what is happening now or what just happened in a couple of generations ago. Now, in America, you know, women got rights only a couple days ago. You know, now it hasn't been a century of rights. And so when you think about the traditional man providing, or the traditional man in America controlling the vote or the ability to vote or to set laws, serve, etc., are you taking into account the fact that traditionally a woman did not have rights? Welcome to the loaded question.
Yes. You know, I'm just processing what you're saying.
Yeah.
I do think whether you're a man or a woman, you can make decisions. I do know that typically we're used to seeing men in leadership, but we have also seen the downside of that too, in that having men in leadership or not having diverse leadership can lead to one-sided decisions that's not taking into account everyone's experiences.
Yeah.
So, America, we're all immigrants as far as I'm concerned. Okay.
Listen. The
Unless
only
you're Native
people
American,
are the Native
okay,
Americans.
that is
yes.
it.
Yes,
Indigenous
we agree.
peoples,
I agree
right,
with you on that.
right.
One, yes.
And so, in coming with different cultures, we're a melting pot. And so, what we're bringing with us is what is tradition someplace else, and it's making it our own here in this country. And so, you know, there's some people who are comfortable with having a head of household who is a man, who is a breadwinner, and it can also be flipped. And it also depends on the type of family that we're talking about too, right?
Yes.
So you have single parents, you have homes where it may not be a healthy relationship with a two-parent household. And so that can also lead to a certain type of dynamic.
Yeah.
So it's just, there is no one definition of it.
Yeah.
I know if when it comes to dating, for instance, right? If we look at it from that perspective, right? Like, I want to be catered to on a date. I want the man to pay the bill, open the door, pay the bill. I want him to walk on the outside. So these are things that I like.
Do not
right?
drag Daniella, please. Do not drag her on social media.
So that is something that I would enjoy.
Yes.
But it's like, but when it comes to the workplace, I don't want to be told what to do from a man necessarily, right?
Correct.
Who I don't feel as if I have some type of just a healthy relationship with, right? So it's kind of like, it depends on the situation and what you're in.
Yeah.
You know?
I think also what comes to mind immediately is, you know, there have been times when the masculinity to provide and to protect was there and needed, right?
Yes.
And I can just imagine a slave family, a family that are all slaves, right? And the man having to kind of stand in a strength in that sort of oppression and protect, not with a lot of power, but maybe with a lot of dynamics. And then as the slave masters, you know, the man is doing the business, he's organizing, and then the woman is keeping the home. And that worked in that dynamic. And then we evolved out of slavery, you know, a couple of years into, and still carrying some of that kind of mental concepts of what a man should be. And I always ask all of my girlfriends about, you know, when you're in the house and somebody breaks in, who is grabbing the bat? And everybody's like, listen, I'm going to be in the bedroom. I'm sending my husband down to battle. And I'm like, but why are you not behind him? You know, or even in front, or by two bats, you know? But I think there are some nuances to it in which we're not realizing in just the concept of masculinity, it is a part of all of us. We all can carry the bat,
right?
But we are choosing to identify with one or the other. And so in America, I've seen present day a lot of men starting to identify only with that part of themselves. So it's like leadership. You're just focused on just being goal-oriented, physical, non-emotional, psychologically resilient, thinking through problems, strategy. You know, all of these things are masculine forms of energy that every single human has in them.
Yes.
Right? But when a man starts to just identify completely with that, then as we say, you know...
He's a boss.
He's a boss.
He's a boss. But if a woman were to do that, Quincy, we know what it is. Should be called the B word. That is it.
Yeah.
That is it.
Yeah.
But why?
And the question is, do we and should we not have those conversations with our girls and our boys to say, you are doing yourself a disservice if you identify completely with that part, because dads will have children.
Yeah.
And you got to bring in that female energy. Hugs. My dad gives the worst hugs is not something you want being said at your funeral.
For most people, I do believe it takes them having children or being around children to develop that type of feminine energy, when in fact it doesn't have to be. But if you're raised to be, you know, you need to man up. If we're being told from a child you need to man up, boys don't cry,
Yes.
Right? So if that's ingrained in you from early, it only makes sense that as an adult and as they're growing, they're not able to express themselves in that way.
Yeah.
So you may think about, here's a scenario, right, Quincy? So when you think about mass shootings, you think about oftentimes the assailant is a man, is a male, right?
Yeah,
and
is
so
true.
it's kind of like, why is that happening? Why are they having a difficult time expressing themselves or having the outlet where they feel like they would need a gun to do that, right? So what's really going on? I know that in talking to young women, girls, it's a different kind of conversation, but it starts from very, very early.
And it's
very
us.
early.
I think we are.
Yes. We're perpetuating that.
Correct.
Yes.
And we are continuing indirectly by saying, guys behave a certain way, women behave a certain way. And there is a wonderful thing. Again, I am in a gay relationship, right? Who's opening the door? Right? Who's paying the bill?
Right.
I think we all have a part of us that either is feeling great when the bill is paid or feeling great when we pay the bill.
Yeah.
Right? But if we dig a little deeper under the surface of that behavior, we will see there's residue of your parents and what you saw and how you more than likely saw that as value. And so now you're even thinking when it comes to money and all of these other things that are now in the material world, it's going to be a masculine energy. And it is. To hunt and gather is a masculine energy.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that only men hunt and gather.
That is true. That
right?
is true.
And every human being can hunt and gather.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
What do you think about just the financial part? Because I know
we're not gonna right?
I think, and especially I'm speaking for my girlfriends that I have in my life.
Yes.
A lot of high earners in my group. And they still want the man to earn more than them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, you realize that you are like the top earners.
Yes.
Who is supposed to come in and out earn you, one, and two, when they are coming in, and for the I think it's two of them that have husbands that earn more than them, that's a different type of man. He is identifying.
Yes.
He wants trophy wife. He wants you to look a certain way, to behave a certain way. And it sometimes have some clashes, some problems there.
Yes. So as a woman, if a woman is a breadwinner, that can lead to issues in the relationship. But
you're going to have to explain that, because how is that an issue?
That can be an issue because it can disrupt the ego of the man. So if he wants to be, if he's like, okay, you know what, I am man, right? And so I control, I make decisions, but in fact, you don't hold the purse strings.
Yeah.
Then that can just rub his ego the wrong way. Do you see what I'm saying? Well,
as my wonderful teacher Eckhart Tolle says, the ego is the author.
Okay.
The ego is that energy that wants to feed on the negative side of your being. And if you are identified with that to the point where your loved ones is affected, you're going to have to do some shadow work, because and your spouse is going to bring it out.
Right.
Because nobody, I don't think Chase cares. Like who has Chase, like all this money in this account. Right. And if you are having, I guess, some struggles at home in which your husband is like, oh my gosh, my wife is out earning me, is because, again, he is identified with that concept of that masculine energy of hunting and gathering. Yes. And you're destined to fail. Right. Because there's nothing that she's not going to sit back and be, let me earn less. And I bet some people do. I hope not.
And that is the reason why some women do not share how much they make with their partners. For that very reason.
Who's doing that?
There's some people,
really?
2025, yes. I know for a fact.
What?
Yes, yes.
Good
I'm
God.
not going to name any names, but I know for a fact. It's very true. I saw an interview recently with a well-known famous comedian, and she's a black woman. She is on television.
Yeah.
And so she knows that she out-earns her partner.
Yeah.
And she has said that when she gets home, he is a breadwinner. So I thought that was interesting because for her, she saw a breadwinner as someone being the head of household, in other words.
Gotcha.
So no matter what she earns,
Yeah.
he is the head of household.
Yeah.
And so she then becomes subservient to him, is
Yeah.
basically how she phrases it, right? And so it's an interesting dynamic. We're raised in a way in which men do certain things, women do certain things.
Yeah.
So it's very boxed in, right? And so when you step out of that box, it then can make people feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
And so the way someone may react to a man who makes a certain decision may be different than a woman who makes a certain
Yeah.
decision.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You don't question.
I
You don't
think-
question that.
We'll be right back after this short break. Stay tuned. There's so much more to come here on Humanities Dialogue. Beloveds, welcome back to Humanities Dialogue. Now back to the show.
If you just look at our present political situation, if a woman was doing that
Oh,
and
no.
all of that, listen, this place would have been ablaze.
Listen.
Because it'd be like, no.
Right.
Absolutely. So I
Right.
do understand we
Right.
look at men and women differently. I think when it comes to the financial part, and I don't know why they're popping into my head, but poor Stedman,
Okay.
right?
Okay. So those
He's a
of you who
smart
may
man.
not be familiar with Stedman, right?
Yeah.
So Stedman is Oprah's partner,
Yeah.
longtime partner.
Yeah.
Yes, Oprah Winfrey. We all know
I
Oprah.
would hope that he is independent in his being to whatever he earns and whatever he does as a life, because I'm thinking they're all retired now. He is grounded in it enough that he understands that the money that I bring to the table, whatever it is a part of, but it's not my identity. Because he will never earn more than that lady. Never. It's not happening.
So he is successful in his own right.
Yeah.
Right? And so for us, it's for them.
Yeah.
Not for us, right? And
Yeah.
so we can look from the outside and then have our opinions, but they have their own dynamic.
I hope we're.
You know?
Could you imagine? They're like, you make so much. I don't know.
Yeah.
But again,
Yeah.
the identification with form of that one part of a man is where I think, because we've evolved as humans now, and
Yes.
we're at a place where we are going to have these conversations because we realize that women do have that masculine energy within them. And a woman can make an intuitive decision. A woman can be a provider. A woman can do every one of those things, but it's the identifying with it, and then you're teaching your children to identify with that also kind of perpetuates the problem.
Agreed.
Because then they will go into relationships or expect the world, expect to speak to a woman anyhow, or expect your girlfriend is going to be a certain way, or, you always see this conversation about both people working, but when the woman comes home, she still cooks.
Yeah.
Or she still cleans, or
Right.
she still takes care of the children
Yes.
completely. And you're coming home from the same hours of work, and you're like, listen, I am tired.
Yeah.
I need a beer.
Different
I need-
expectations.
Yeah,
Different
different
expectations.
expectations.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about men in leadership, Daniella? I know.
So, Quincy, I do find that when there are men in leadership, it's a different type of experience.
How?
Men are typically not detail-oriented. They make decisions based on the data that they gather, not really taking...
As like if they're decisive?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I find that women tend to be more detail-oriented and also gathering more intel. It's not just the data and the facts. They're looking at the entire picture. And so I am actually more confident in her decision-making than I would be in his,
Yeah.
because she's looking at things from all perspectives.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
But at the same time, the way that's received is something different.
Yeah.
She may be received as someone who is not able to make decisions. She takes longer.
She's wasting too much time.
Wasting too
She's
much
not crisp, not sharp.
time.
Where's the
Right.
urgency? This
Right.
decision needs to be made.
Exactly.
These are the facts.
Right.
Make a decision.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And men are just, they're embraced. They are lauded for that. They are appreciated and seen as someone who is able to do things in real time. When in fact, there's so many things happening in the background that it's just, right?
Yeah.
Women, they ask more questions. That's just what it is. And I believe that's just who we are,
Yeah.
And so I do think it's important for us to have leaders who are able to have that balance between masculine and feminine energy, right? A man can exhibit both. A woman can exhibit both. It could be balanced. It doesn't mean that because you're a man is only masculine energy, you can also have the feminine energy as well. So I think the sign of a great leader is someone who is able to have the balance between both, right?
That is, I think, why we're having the conversation.
Yes.
It is understanding that each human being has both.
Yeah.
And we must understand that. And we must, I think, empower our children and the future to understand that you have both. Now, if you're choosing to identify with one over the other, there are consequences to that.
They have to understand that, yes.
If you are choosing to identify with the female energy more than the male, there are consequences to it. But I think our goal for our next generation is to empower them to a place where there's a balance and an understanding, right? Because again, when I see female leaders, they do bring that compassion into their leadership. They are really thinking about, how does it affect the people?
Yes.
Right? And I've seen also female leaders that are very decisive, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is very different. Of course, we call them another name. We make all kinds of horrible labels to women that are very decisive and lean to the masculine energy. And I bet for a lot of those women, somebody taught them, if you lean in more to that masculine energy, you will be taken more seriously. You will be treated a certain way. You will be given certain rights and privileges. And I think they lean into it. And then of course, the byproduct is they're not the best leaders.
No.
They're not the best leaders.
They're not. They may be high performing at the level in which they were right before being promoted, but it doesn't make them the best leaders. I agree. I agree. I think that you need to assess and adjust. There are some people that you may talk to who they can gravitate towards what you're saying if you bring that little bit more of a masculine energy, right?
Correct.
And they could be on the flip side as well. Labels. So a man who exhibits more feminine energy may be labeled as sensitive. He is a P. We know what the P word is, right? And so it's just, why do we do that? Why? If this person's more in touch with their feminine side, why? Why?
Because again, the identification of form with, from our fathers saying to us, you need to,
Man
right?
up.
As a gay man, it's I've seen it, right? You're walking a certain way, or you're talking a certain way, or you're crying too much, or you're asking too much questions, or make a decision, molded me into a human being that did not understand, I was able to use the other half of me as a superpower to kind of really connect and lead better. I had to learn that through life, in which you're like, hey, you talk too much. Like, if my mom is to bring my report cards, every single one of them, too talkative, needs to talk less. Maybe I was talking too much. But again.
But that spoke to your superpower, Quincy. Like, that's who you are. That is who you are.
Right.
Yeah.
And it took my mom realizing and never really making that a problem to say, hey, you need to stop talking. You need to just be more observant as men do. She was like, okay, you like to talk too much. Let's get you into theater.
Right.
Let's get you talking some other places.
Yeah.
Let's get you debating. Let's get you on a leadership thing for a camp or something.
Let's have you blossom and
Correct.
use that gift that you have.
Because
Yeah.
being talkative, I think, came from being in a household where I was the little one and everybody was just adults.
Yeah.
So they were talking. They were having conversations. What am I going to do? Sit around and watch? No,
You'll jump right in.
I'm in getting myself in trouble.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
But it sparked something in me which I realized, okay, people like to communicate with each other. And so if I talk to them or I, lean into them a little more, I'll get more. I'll get what I want.
Yes.
Right? If I want something from my mother, I'm going into the kitchen. How you doing?
You catch more flies by honey, Quincy. That is it. That is it. Yeah.
My mother's already like,
what do you need? What do you want?
I don't need nothing. I can't hang out with you a little bit. And then I hit her with it, a little down in the conversation.
Right.
So
right.
again, it's really trying to empower our youth in understanding the balance between the two. I know in parenting, that's a tickly subject.
It is.
Right?
I've come across a child who has said, no. The question is posed, oh, do you want to catch a movie? No. Their siblings wanted to, and the siblings went. And she stood in her power and said no. Quincy, let me tell you,
What?
that made me, it triggered a response in me because I knew that at that age,
You didn't have an option.
No, it was no option. Let me go to the movies. That is it. That is it, Quincy. There is no.
We are going to the
that
movies.
That is it.
You're going to the movies in 4.
That is it. That is it. There was no
Yeah.
type of dialogue and conversation, but that speaks to how parenting is different today.
Yeah.
It's called soft parenting, Quincy.
I will tell you the soft parenting. I think my mother had the soft parenting before
it was even a thing.
Before it was a thing, because
Yeah.
I would have gotten that option. And I always remember my mom asking to wear I think I'd gotten some piece of clothing that I loved.
Okay.
And she wanted to go to church. And I, of course, put on my lovely wonderfulness.
Yes.
And I went to church with her, and I remember she had this white pleated skirt. She was ready for church.
Okay.
But as I compare myself to what I had on, she didn't really care. She was like, this is mine. He wants to wear that. He wants to wear that. I don't know if she got any flack, but my mother, again, was raising me when she was much older. And so I think a lot of those concepts, she was like, listen, he's going to be the best that he can be.
Right.
And it instilled in me certain qualities in really asking the question of, how can I be of service? Or is this the best for me? And I remember when I was little, she asked me about choosing the school that I went to and giving me that choice. And I've had this conversation with her after many, many moons, when I was an adult. And she said either or, she knew that I would do well because she was going to provide the resources of afternoon tutoring and lessons and so on for me to be successful. But my choosing to go to the lesser school than she was organizing for me was just because I had more friends there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it worked out. But again, will I give my child that option? I don't think so. But I would hope so.
Yeah.
Because it empowered me with the responsibility of it.
Yes.
So again, soft parenting is in. I think it's winning because it's empowering our children. But at the same time, we are coming from parents that were black and white. You were a child. I'm a parent.
Yes.
I lead. I'm not your friend.
Right. Right.
I will guide you in the best way I can.
I find it so odd, Quincy, when I see things nowadays and like, oh, my daughter's my best friend. And I'm like,
Yeah.
And you would hear the opposite. We're not friends, right? We're not in the friend business, just to what you spoke to, right? Because I think it's a very delicate line. I do think that you need to have that kind of relationship with your children, that they're able to talk to you about the issues they're having.
Yeah.
and when they're uncomfortable as well.
Yeah.
And that's why secrets can just really kill, right? Because they harp
Yeah.
on these secrets and things are happening throughout life and they're not even sure how to maneuver because they're afraid of being judged by that one person who they should be able to confide in,
Yeah.
who they go home to. You know, like I've gone through this today, Mom, or I've gone through this today, Dad. Like, how do I even,
I know for me, I didn't have a masculine, I didn't have a father in my upbringing like you had a male presence.
Yes.
You had a dad there.
Do you think that life would be different for you if you did?
I'm not so sure. Because the thing about my mom is she embraced both parts of my mom fixed a window.
Okay.
My mom was coming. I remember we had a guy in the yard once. My mom came out with. We had like a not a cutlass. We had a vase that was made out of brass.
Okay.
And she whacked that man. That man was running, and up to now it still has a dent in it from the man's head, I guess.
Right.
But she was showing up in a both in the soft, loving way. But also in that masculine energy because she was a single mom.
Yeah.
So she had to she had a motorcycle.
Right.
And
Which back then is, yes.
she wore pants.
Yeah.
Right? But the pants was
did not-
because of the motorcycle.
Right. I did not know until a few years ago that there was a time in America where women were not allowed to wear pants. I thought it was absolutely insane.
There were no pantsuits back then.
No. And I love a pantsuit, right? Yeah.
Listen.
Yeah. Different
And
time.
Again, you kind of. So I think I lucked out in the family that I have because it showed up in a very different way.
Non-traditional.
And I think if I did have a male in my life, I think my mom would have to pivot towards being less than, in which like she would fix something or she would see if there's a spark plug thingy with a bike and she's in there,
Right.
or if she's cooking. Or she's telling me a story, or she's scolding me, for something. So it was a balance in which I really saw a true representation of leaning.
Right.
She would sway from one end to another. Big shout out, Mom.
We have stay-at-home fathers. Nowadays, that was not something back then,
Oh, yes.
years ago.
Yes.
And it's something I have to say initially I wasn't comfortable with. And I'm like, why would that be the case?
Yeah.
But it just makes sense for people and whatever works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, identifying with just the concept of the
Yeah.
energy. I think in healthcare, we see a lot of Filipino nurses that are the breadwinners, and the man is kind of doing what the traditional behaviors or things.
Yes.
The nurturing part of the relationship. And that's a perfect example of where the man has it and you tap into the superpower. You give the hugs. You take care of the kids. You
Yes.
nurture.
Yes.
Not to say that he's less than or more than. It's just that it's in you. And I know we have seen parents where you're like, my dad is a rock star. My mom is a rock star. I can say my mom was a rock star because they're giving you the hugs and they're disciplining you at the same time. They're showing you how to deal with money and to be decisive and stand up for yourself while still showing you and nurturing you and showing you how to love. That's where that's where we should be
Yes.
evolving to.
Yeah.
And this whole kind of stepping backwards into
And the reversion, into the traditional.
I would like
right.
to just go to work and earn and not
Right.
participate in my child's life,
Right.
or I should only lead this way because I'm a man, or
Right.
et cetera, et cetera,
I
et
think that
cetera.
speaks to patriarchy, misogyny, and I think about the Me Too movement and what that has done in the workplace, that has done in life, in that you have men who are in control and abuse that control.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that has affected people in different ways for years upon years upon years.
Yeah.
And so there is so much strength in knowing your power, but just understanding that it has an impact on people in different ways.
Yeah.
And so it's knowing how to strike that balance and understanding that your actions does lead to a reaction, right? And so there are consequences to what's being done.
Yeah.
You know, and understanding that. So when people seem to be reverting to the old ways of Americana, right? When it comes to
We'll be right back after this short break. Stay tuned. There's so much more to come here on Humanities Dialogue. Don't forget to visit DEIPeople.com and follow us on Instagram at DEIPeopleOfficial for more insights and updates. See you in a moment, beloveds. Beloveds, thank you for supporting the brands and initiatives that make Humanities Dialogue possible. Now back to the show.
Being, yep.
Yeah, of being.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very dangerous place to be.
It also must be said that in this conversation that there will be consequences for that, right? And I know right now it's, you know, our leadership, especially in our country, it's leaning towards that I am the head of household and everybody else is, you know, just living here.
Yes. And they must follow
What I
Yes,
say.
follow what I
No
say.
questions asked.
Right.
And if you do ask a question, we're going to have some problems.
Right.
Will have its consequences. Because as a people, we have evolved. And we see the strengths of that, and we also see the disadvantages of that behavior and that leadership. In 2025, coming out of COVID, coming out of all the things that have happened in the world, that is not the leadership that
No.
will give you the best bang for your buck.
Agreed.
You need to be compassionate and balanced. And if you're making a decision, right, fully understanding your decision may not fit for everybody, you're explaining that balance to the other. So for example, if you are deciding as a leader, hey, I would like women to not work anymore, right? I'm just saying this because I know some of that is going through the legislation now. Explain that with compassion and understanding in your small room. Y'all fight that out. Get some women to that table to ask, is this something that we would want? Are we going to be paying some stipends to these women? How are they going to be empowered for the future, right? How are they going to be best moms if they're, you know, they're saying you cannot be educated or you cannot, you know, be equal in humanity in a choice, right? And that's where I think the absence of the female energy in leadership will always lead to a place of destruction because it's one-sided. And if it's only about power, it's only on being decisive, my way or the highway energy, it will balance itself.
Right.
Right? And I think COVID showed us that, listen,
People
we
are not-
take in everybody,
That is it.
right?
That
we
is
take
it.
in everybody.
People have options, Quincy.
Yeah.
That's the reality of it.
Yeah.
They have options. And so if I know that I'm not liking the way you're speaking to me, I'm not liking the policies and protocols that are now in place, I'm going to go elsewhere.
Yeah.
Where I feel appreciated, where I feel as if I'm being welcomed. And so that's why it's important to have an inclusive environment. It's important to have a world of culturally competent leaders.
Yes.
When you don't have that, that leads to problems. People not able to perform. They're not able to be at their best, period.
Preach.
Yeah, and that then trickles
Yeah.
down to their love. Like it's a dynamic that it's just a ongoing impact that just people don't really they don't realize how much this resonates and how it affects others.
Yeah.
You know, when I think about children of today, so we're under a new administration, and how will this affect them? How will this lack of inclusivity affect them and how they grow and develop? Because we have a leader in place or leaders in place who are just afraid to even say how they really feel and go with the grain and not against it. You know?
I think we're kind of flushing
Yeah.
right now. I know it's extreme and it's uncomfortable and it's
Yes.
causing a lot of people pain.
Yes, and harm.
But it's a flushing of this behavior because it's like you're almost bringing it into the light to be burnt. Because deep down inside, we know that that one-sided way of being does not lend to. And I think now as we look at work from home policies or DEI policies and all of this social justice, health equity and all of those things, the one-sided way of being or identifying with that just that masculine energy can never heal those things. And so what will happen, I believe, is because it is swinging that way, we're going to experience it in this 4 years, right? And there's going to be, I think in the middle of it, it's going to be a swing of we need to fix these behaviors. And anybody behaving like this will get a reckoning. So if you're a dad and you're showing up in your household like that, your child is going to become of age at some time and they're going to point the finger to you and say, you were horrible.
And give them the worst hugs.
Yeah, and you give the worst hugs,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You give the worst hugs. And I think that's where the essence of being responsible for your being in bringing both a balanced, modern, let's take the modern, but balanced way of being in everything that you do is going to give you the more bang for your buck. You know, when we're thinking about just masculinity in 2025 and moving on, it's about being whatever you are, a leader, a parent, a mother, whatever, being balanced and understanding how you're contributing to others, you know.
How can we really, so the thing is, Quincy, knowing that you're unbalanced is
the first step.
It's the first step.
Is the first step.
And so if you don't see that there is, it's not equal, right, in terms of the energies, then what can you do? So I think of unpacking, right?
Yeah.
So whether it be therapy, whether it be you doing some shadow work and understanding that your ways of being have not served you and the people that you love, essentially.
Yeah.
It's taking that step. And so how do we create a place where people feel as if they are able to do that work and not be labeled in a negative way?
Yeah.
You know, that's part of it.
The first steps for any man that is even contemplating having this conversation with themselves, right, is to ask yourself, what am I identifying with? And if you are identifying yourself with providing, you are the breadwinner, you are the hunter-gatherer, you are, you know, less expressive but decisive, you already know, right? But you're going to have to be honest with yourself and say, okay, well, that is a masculine energy. What am I doing for the other half of me, which is female energy? Or are we just labeling it that, right? But it's kind of the yin and the yang.
Yes.
What am I doing to make sure I'm nurturing myself? What am I doing to make sure that my wife feels fulfilled? What am I doing to make sure I'm a good lover? What am I doing to make sure that my children honor me in every present, right? That's when you're leaning into. Now, it does not mean that your physical form as a man, anything happens. It just means you have a richer life.
Yeah.
You just have a richer life to experience because, yes, you are crying in the movie theater and your children are like, look at dad crying. They're remembering that forever.
Yeah.
That you showed up in such a way that your employees understand. When he is making a decision, he thought of both sides. He is thinking about my fulfillment as an employee as well as the bottom line. He's thinking about me as a person as well as a contributor. So when you're thinking, it's all about being balanced, just balanced in that energy, and it's all on us to have those difficult conversations. And with that,
On that note,
yes,
yes,
we've come to the end of this episode. I want to thank you, Daniella.
Thank you, Quincy.
For sharing this episode with us.
Of course.
Just remember to subscribe. Subscribe to DEI People Official on Instagram and our YouTube channel. Again, another wonderful conversation with my co-host.
Agreed. And be insanely great. Until next time.
Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
We have come to the end of today's episode of Humanities Dialogue, presented by DEIPeople.com. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Until next time, from your hosts, Quincy Daniella and Daniella Fairbairn. Now, continue the dialogue on at DEIPeople.com and at DEI People Official on Instagram. See you soon, beloveds.